Have you ever spent hours carefully planning your garden layout, trying to remember where you planted your tomatoes last year, just so you do not plant them there again? We are told that if we do not rotate our crops, terrible diseases will wipe out our entire harvest. But what if I told you that this is one of the biggest gardening myths of our time? Today, we are going to talk about a mind-blowing concept. I have planted my tomatoes in the exact same spot for 10 consecutive years, and I have not seen a single speck of blight or disease. I am going to share a brilliant Japanese gardening secret that allows you to harvest 3 times as many tomatoes with zero crop rotation and almost no physical effort. This method completely contradicts what most old-school gardeners believe, but by the end of this video, you will never look at your garden beds the same way again. Tell me in the comments right now, how often do you move your tomato plants? Let us see how many of you are still doing it the hard way. To understand why this works, we need to look at how nature actually operates. For generations, agricultural textbooks have insisted on crop rotation. The theory is simple. If you plant the same vegetable in the same spot, it will drain specific nutrients from the soil, and diseases will build up in the dirt waiting to attack next year. This makes perfect sense for massive industrial farms that use harsh chemical fertilizers and strip the land bare every autumn. But a home garden is not an industrial farm. Think about a wild apple tree or a berry bush in the forest. Nobody moves that tree to a new spot every spring. It drops its leaves, the leaves decay, and it feeds the soil in a perfect, closed loop. The ground around that tree becomes specifically adapted to support exactly that plant. The Japanese recognized this natural cycle centuries ago. They realized that instead of moving the plant to find healthy soil, you can simply create an incredibly robust, disease-immune, living soil system right where the plant already stands. This concept changes everything about backyard gardening. Let us start by breaking down the biggest fear gardeners have: the fear of exhausted soil. You have probably heard that tomatoes are heavy feeders. People say they suck all the calcium and potassium out of the ground, leaving it totally barren. But soil is not an empty bucket that you just drink from until it is dry. Treat your soil like a bank account that earns interest, not a coal mine that you hollow out. When you leave the roots of last year's tomatoes in the ground to decay, you are returning a massive amount of organic matter right back into the earth. The secret is not running away from the depleted soil. The secret is actively rebuilding it in place. By keeping the bed stationary, you are building a permanent home for beneficial microorganisms. Every time you move a garden bed, you are forcing the soil ecosystem to start over from scratch. When you keep your tomatoes in the same place year after year, you are actually giving the soil biology the time it needs to establish a permanent, rich, and highly specialized environment. This is the very foundation of lazy but genius gardening. Now, let us talk about the invisible war happening under your feet. The main reason people rotate crops is to run away from pathogens, especially late blight. But running away is a losing game, because fungal spores travel on the wind anyway. The Japanese method focuses on overwhelming the bad guys with good guys. Think of your garden soil like a highly exclusive, crowded nightclub. If the club is completely packed with friendly, beneficial microbes, the dangerous disease-causing fungi simply cannot get past the bouncers. There is no room for them to set up camp. When you constantly till and move beds, you kill off the good microbes, leaving an empty VIP section for diseases to move right in. By feeding the same bed continuously with organic matter, you breed an army of helpful bacteria that aggressively defend your tomato plants. They literally eat the bad spores before they can touch your roots. This biological shield gets stronger and stronger with every passing year. That is why year 5 is always healthier than year 1. So, How exactly do we build this crowded nightclub of good bacteria? It all starts in the autumn, long after the harvest is finished. Most gardeners make a massive mistake here. They pull up every single plant, rake the soil perfectly clean, and leave it totally bare for the winter. This is a disaster. Bare soil is dead soil. The secret method requires you to be a little messy. When the season ends, do not rip the tomato roots out of the ground. Take a pair of pruning shears and cut the main stem right at the soil line. Leave the entire root system buried exactly where it grew. Those decaying roots will create microscopic tunnels in the soil as they break down. These tunnels act like a sponge, holding winter moisture and providing perfect little homes for earthworms. The roots also contain carbon, which is the primary food source for your protective soil bacteria. By leaving the roots behind, you are doing zero physical labor, while simultaneously preparing the absolute best foundation for next spring. The next crucial step is what I like to call the trench composting trick. Because we are never moving this tomato bed, we need to feed it heavily without digging up the whole area. Right next to where the old roots are rotting, use a small trowel to dig a very shallow trench. It only needs to be about 4 inches deep. Throughout the autumn, dump your everyday kitchen scraps directly into this shallow trench. We are talking about banana peels, coffee grounds, eggshells, and vegetable peelings. Then, simply cover it back up with a thin layer of dirt. You do not need a fancy, expensive compost bin that takes a year to break down. You are composting right inside the growing bed. Over the winter, the worms will travel directly to this trench, eat the food scraps, and leave incredibly rich worm castings exactly where your new tomato plants will go next spring. You are letting the worms do all the heavy lifting and fertilizing for you, while you sit inside drinking hot tea. Here is where the specific Japanese technique comes into play. It is all about utilizing fermented organic matter, similar to the concept of bokashi. Regular compost is great, but fermented compost is like a supercharged vitamin shot for your garden. You can easily make a homemade lactic acid bacteria serum. It sounds complicated, but it is just rice wash water and milk left to ferment. When you spray this natural homemade probiotic onto your garden beds in the early spring, you are introducing millions of beneficial bacteria that aggressively hunt down and consume overwintering fungal spores. Think of it as feeding your garden a probiotic yogurt to fix its digestion. This bacteria completely dominates the soil environment. It breaks down the tough organic matter from your autumn trench and turns it into liquid gold that the tomato roots can easily drink. This completely eliminates the need for expensive synthetic fertilizers. It is cheap, it is natural, and it ensures that your stationary bed remains perfectly sterile to bad diseases while bursting with good life. Let us move on to the ultimate physical shield against disease. If you are growing in the same spot, you absolutely must master the art of deep mulching. Late blight and other nasty tomato diseases do not actually start on the leaves. They live in the soil. When heavy rain hits bare dirt, it splashes those microscopic disease spores up onto the lower leaves of your tomato plants. That is how the infection begins. To stop this completely, you need to put an umbrella over your soil. The moment you plant your tomatoes in the spring, cover the entire surface of the bed with a thick layer of straw, old hay, or dried grass clippings. I'm talking about a layer at least 4 to 6 inches deep. This thick blanket absorbs the impact of raindrops, meaning zero soil ever splashes onto your plants. As a bonus, this thick mulch completely blocks out sunlight, which means weed seeds cannot germinate. You will never have to spend your weekends pulling weeds on your hands and knees again. It is the ultimate lazy gardening hack. Watering is another area where traditional gardeners accidentally kill their own plants. When you grow tomatoes in the same spot for a decade, you learn that moisture management is everything. Never, ever water your tomatoes from above. If you use a sprinkler that gets the leaves wet, you are practically begging for a fungal infection. Fungi need moisture on the leaf surface to reproduce. The Japanese secret to healthy stationary beds is strict root watering. You want the soil beneath the mulch to be damp, but the leaves of the plant must remain bone dry. Consider setting up a simple drip irrigation tape underneath your thick layer of straw. It takes about 20 minutes to set up once, and it will save you hundreds of hours of standing there with a heavy hose. The drip tape puts the water exactly where the plant needs it, right at the root zone, without wasting a single drop to evaporation. Dry leaves mean healthy fruit. It is really that simple. You cannot talk about an indestructible tomato bed without mentioning companion planting. Since you are not rotating the tomatoes out, you need to rotate other things in. The borders of your stationary tomato bed should be packed with strong-smelling herbs and flowers. Plant a thick row of basil and French marigolds right at the base of your tomato plants. This is not just to make the garden look pretty. These companion plants engage in chemical warfare beneath the soil. Marigold roots release a specific compound that kills harmful root knot nematodes, which are microscopic worms that destroy tomato roots. Basil dramatically improves the flavor of the tomatoes while confusing insect pests with its strong scent. By creating a diverse mini jungle in that one specific spot, you are building a resilient ecosystem. The pests get confused, the soil gets enriched, and you get an incredible harvest of tomatoes and herbs perfectly paired for your summer salads. It is a win-win situation. Now we have to discuss pruning. Proper pruning is essential when planting in the same spot because air circulation is your best friend. A dense, tangled tomato bush traps humidity, and humidity breeds disease. We want to open the windows in this stuffy room. The lazy but highly effective way to prune is to ruthlessly remove the lower leaves. Once your tomato plant is about 3 feet tall, strip off every single branch and leaf that is touching or even close to the ground. You want at least 10 inches of bare stem at the bottom of the plant. This creates a wind tunnel beneath the foliage. The breeze will blow right through the base of the plants, keeping the main stems dry and cool. Do not worry about hurting the plant. Those lower leaves are usually shaded anyway and do not contribute much to the energy production. By focusing the plant's energy strictly on the top canopy and the developing fruit, you ensure massive yields while maintaining a perfectly dry, disease-free environment at ground level. There is a secret underground internet that helps stationary beds thrive, and it is called the mycorrhizal fungal network. This is a type of incredibly beneficial fungus that attaches itself directly to the roots of your tomato plants. Think of these fungi as tiny extensions of the root system. They reach far out into the soil, mining for water and minerals like phosphorus, and trade them back to the tomato plant in exchange for plant sugars. It is a beautiful symbiotic relationship. When you till the soil or constantly move your beds, you shred this delicate underground web to pieces. It takes months for it to rebuild. But when you plant your tomatoes in the exact same spot year after year without digging, this fungal network grows massive and extremely efficient. After 3 or 4 years, your tomato roots are plugged into a vast superhighway of nutrients. This is exactly why my plants are so incredibly strong and productive despite never changing locations. The network provides everything they need. Let us address the elephant in the room. The absolute worst thing you can do to a permanent tomato bed is use a rototiller. Digging and turning the soil is an outdated practice that destroys soil structure. Imagine an earthquake hitting a perfectly organized city. That is what a shovel does to your soil biome. Digging breaks up the fungal networks, kills the earthworms, and brings thousands of dormant weed seeds up to the surface where the sun will make them sprout. To maintain a 10-year streak of zero diseases, you must embrace the no-dig philosophy. The only digging you should ever do is making the tiny hole to drop your new seedling into in the spring. All the fertilizer, all the compost, and all the mulch go directly on top of the soil. Let the rain and the worms pull those nutrients downward naturally. Nature does not own a shovel, and neither should you. This single change will save your back and double your harvest. One specific problem that haunts tomato growers is blossom end rot. This is when the bottom of the tomato turns black and sunken. People think this is a disease caused by planting in the same spot, but it is actually just a calcium deficiency. Since we are not rotating crops, we need a clever way to keep calcium levels high. The easiest, cheapest trick is using plain wood ash from your winter fireplace. Wood ash is absolutely loaded with calcium and potassium. Every spring, a few weeks before planting, lightly dust the surface of your permanent bed with a few handfuls of sifted wood ash. Do not go crazy, just a light dusting. The spring rains will wash this calcium down into the root zone. Combined with the even moisture provided by your thick straw mulch, your plants will easily absorb all the calcium they need. You will never see an ugly, black-bottomed tomato again. It takes 2 minutes to apply, and it solves the problem completely. What happens if you actually spot a sick leaf? Even with the best preparation, a lower leaf might get a yellow spot from old age or stress. The old-school panic reaction is to rip the whole plant out or douse the entire garden in toxic copper sprays. The smart gardener's approach is much calmer. It is called targeted amputation. If you see a suspicious leaf, simply snip it off with clean scissors and throw it in the trash, not the compost. Do not spray the whole bed. Trust the immune system you have built in the soil. Because your plants are plugged into that vast fungal network and protected by lactic acid bacteria, they are incredibly strong. They can fight off minor infections entirely on their own, just like a healthy human fights off a cold. By removing just the infected leaf, you lower the spore count without disturbing the biological balance of your garden. Do not panic. Just observe, snip, and let nature do the rest. The transition period is something you must be prepared for. If you decide to try this Japanese method and keep your tomatoes in the same spot, the first year might feel quite normal. But the magic truly happens in year 2 and year 3. This is the concept of compounding interest applied to garden soil. Each year you add mulch, each year you leave the roots, and each year you avoid tilling, the soil gets softer, darker, and richer. By year 5, you will be able to push your bare hand deep into the soil without any effort. The dirt will smell sweet and earthy, like a deep forest after a rainstorm. This is the moment your plants become virtually bulletproof. You must be patient and trust the process. Do not get nervous and move the bed just because someone at the local garden center told you that you have to. Stick to the plan. The long-term rewards are absolutely staggering. Another massive advantage of a stationary bed is the ability to build permanent support structures. Tying up tomatoes is one of the most annoying chores in the garden. When you rotate crops, you have to move your heavy wooden stakes, metal cages, or wire trellises every single spring. It is exhausting. Because I know exactly where my tomatoes will be for the next 10 years, I built a heavy-duty, beautiful wooden trellis right over the bed. It never moves. In the spring, I simply plant the seedlings at the base of the trellis and tie a string dropping down from the top bar. As the tomato grows, I lazily twist the main stem around the string. It takes about 10 seconds per plant each week. By creating permanent infrastructure, you are eliminating hours of frustrating setup time. Your garden looks neater, your plants are supported perfectly, and your back remains pain-free. This is the essence of lazy but brilliant gardening. Let us talk about seed selection. If you are going to grow in the exact same spot forever, you need the right genetics. While hybrid seeds from the store are fine, the absolute best results come from saving your own heirloom seeds. When a tomato plant grows in your specific soil, fighting your specific climate, and interacting with your unique soil bacteria, it encodes that survival data into its seeds. If you save the seeds from your biggest, healthiest tomato this year and plant them in that exact same bed next year, the new plant will be genetically adapted to that specific microenvironment. After 4 or 5 years of saving seeds from the same bed, you will have created a custom variety of tomato that is uniquely bulletproof to your exact backyard. It becomes your own personal super strain. This is a level of disease resistance that you simply cannot buy in a shiny packet from the hardware store. To maintain this system, you must embrace the concept of green manure. Even though we are not moving the tomatoes, we can still practice a form of micro-rotation during the off-season. The moment the first hard frost kills your tomato plants in the late autumn, cut them down and immediately scatter a cover crop seed right over the mulch. Things like winter rye or mustard seeds are perfect. These hardy plants will sprout in the cold and grow a few inches before winter sets in. They act as a living blanket, holding the soil together and preventing erosion. Mustard roots actually release natural biofumigants that cleanse the soil of harmful nematodes over the winter. When spring arrives, you simply chop this green cover crop down and let it rot right on top of the bed as extra mulch. You are growing your own fertilizer exactly where you need it, ensuring the soil is rested and recharged before the new tomato seedlings even arrive. It is also crucial to understand the difference between feeding the plant and feeding the soil. Traditional chemical fertilizers are like giving your plant an energy drink. It forces massive, rapid growth, but it bypasses the soil biology completely. Over time, salt from these chemicals builds up and kills the earthworms. When you garden in the same spot for a decade, you must throw away the synthetic blue powders. Your only job is to feed the soil microbes. You feed them with compost, shredded leaves, straw, and kitchen scraps. When the microbes are well fed and happy, they will naturally process those materials and feed the tomato plant at the exact perfect rate the plant requires. It is a slow, steady, and incredibly healthy diet. The plants grow thicker stems. The leaves are a deep, dark green, and the tomatoes taste 100 times better because they are pulling complex trace minerals from living earth, not just sucking up salty chemical water. You might be wondering if this method works for other crops too. While this video is focused on tomatoes, the principle of undisturbed, permanent beds applies to almost everything in a lazy garden. Peppers, eggplants, and cucumbers all thrive in rich, fungal-dominated soil. The only vegetables that truly demand movement are heavy root crops like potatoes, purely because harvesting them requires digging up the soil. But for fruiting crops that grow above ground, the stationary method is a miracle. Imagine having designated permanent zones in your garden: the tomato zone, the pepper zone, the squash zone. You never have to draw confusing maps or worry about what was planted where 3 years ago. You just focus on making each specific zone healthier and richer every single season. Gardening transforms from a stressful puzzle into a relaxing, predictable joy. Let us quantify the actual time you save with this method. Think about a standard spring weekend for a traditional gardener. They spend 4 hours tilling a new spot, 2 hours moving trellises, 3 hours digging in fresh compost, and another hour trying to remember their crop rotation chart. That is 10 hours of heavy, sweaty labor before a single seed is planted. With the permanent bed method, my spring preparation takes exactly 20 minutes. I walk out, move a little bit of the straw mulch aside, dig a tiny hole, drop in the tomato plant, and tie it to the permanent string. That is it. I spend the rest of the weekend sitting in a lawn chair, drinking lemonade, and watching the garden grow. By letting nature's biology do the hard work underground, you free yourself up to actually enjoy the sanctuary you have created. You get triple the harvest for 1/10 of the effort. The greatest secret in gardening is that nature already knows exactly what it is doing. We just have to get out of the way. By keeping your tomatoes in the same spot for 10 years, you are not inviting disease. You are building an impenetrable fortress of soil biology. You are trading a shovel for a system of deep mulching, trench composting, and natural bacterial defense. The turning point for every gardener is the moment they realize that healthy soil cannot be built by constantly tearing it apart. This method will save your back, save your weekends, and give you the most massive, delicious tomato harvests of your life. Stop fighting the soil and start feeding it. Thank you so much for watching and learning with me today. If this video changed the way you think about your garden, please hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and share it with a fellow gardener. Now, I have a question for you. What is the longest you have ever grown the same vegetable in the exact same spot? And what were the results? Drop your stories in the comments below and let us keep growing smarter, not harder.